it looks at the true size of Africa. I think we often have these conversations when you travel abroad and someone asks, where are you from? You say you're from Nairobi. Say, okay, that's somewhere in Africa. So do you know, have a friend in Abidjan? And Abidjan is in French-speaking Africa. And for some reason, they think that Africa is a country. Binyabanga Wainaina once wrote something about how not to look at Africa, or what not to write about Africa. And we also have a beautiful TED talk by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie called The Danger of the Single Story. So we want to encourage people to look beyond this singular idea of Africa as one amalgam culture, which is actually not true. We have over 1,200 languages, and I'm talking about major languages. In fact, I think there are about 2,200 more or less. And we are about 1.2 billion, which is just under the population of a country like India. But we have so much more space and variety of culture. And so if you look then at the way in which myself and Abbas and a few other friends who are pushing the Africa with a K, we believe that until lions have their own historians, tales of the hunt will always glorify the hunter. And we reference Chinua Achebe and the Nigerian culture that he subsisted from, that says that we need to become the lion's historians. We need to tell the African story. We need to co-create a new narrative in which Africans are telling the story from their perspective. And I'll get into a bit more detail there. So I'm going to then move very quickly into contrasting Africa with the sea, in my view and in the view of my colleagues who are like-minded, to suggest the view of Africa from the outside looking in. So this is the perspective most of the world looks at Africa from a distance, I might have to say. And that is why I've chosen this analogous view of someone looking through binoculars. This is to be contrasted with Africa with the K, which is how Africans see themselves, or rather Africa from the inside out. This beautiful Benin ivory mask, if you like, or figurine, was done many years before colonial powers came into this continent, and I think was shipped away into one of those Western countries in their museums. So I'm using that as a kind of a placeholder to suggest how Africans see themselves. And if you look at that particular image, there's beauty, there's a respect of human being and nature, using natural materials, referencing the context in which we operate, and basically a sense of a pride and confidence. And this is the Africa that I'd like us to co-create, and they're discursive. It invites you into discussion, into debate. It is not figurative. It is not photorealistic. It's not suggesting that what I'm communicating is perfect. No, it's saying I'm making a statement and I'm inviting you to join me in this debate. So for example, you see Cyrus here, Kabiru, who's a Kenyan artist, who is using this wonderful spectacles to invite people to look at things differently. I like this very much because I think it's an invitation to all of us to look at Africa from a very different perspective, and also from a variety of means. I particularly like the one in the center at the bottom there, which looks like a compound eye of an insect. At the same time, it references some cultures which have those kind of eyes, which I shall not mention. So the other bit about African design is that it's eclectic. You'll see that African design is inspired by the rest of the world, just as much as it influences the rest of the world. So for example, we often talk about Italian design or Scandinavian design. You'll find many elements of those in Africa, because Africa is massive, as I mentioned earlier. And it also has its own traditions, and some of them actually approximate traditions that are seen elsewhere. And so when we look at African design, I'd like us to be open to the possibility that it's a hybrid of ideas. It is not pure ideas from one place, but it is ideas that come from different places. Notwithstanding, there are several design elements that you find across the board. For example, you'll find the use of natural materials, earth-colored materials or palettes are very popular. And also a kind of honesty in the design and authenticity in the way the materials are expressed. You'll see like this stool in the foreground there, made of a log of from a tree trunk, but it's also got a little sheepskin for the comfort. And it's not apologetic about the fact that it has come from an authentic trunk. It's not trying to be something else. So this idea of eclecticism, as well as the referencing of authentic and pure ideas, is something that we find common among African design. The other bit which I'd like us to acknowledge is that African design is rich in symbolism. I say this because one of the ways in which people from elsewhere look at African art is they miss the point, because they look at it when you see, for example, figurines of a little statuette, and you say, we were taught classically as designers and fine artists that the human head fits into the body's height about 7.5 to 8 times. And in some of these statuettes, and I'm sure you know the ones I'm referring to, you'll find that the head sometimes fits in only 3 times, or if you're lucky, 4. So if you look at that and compare it to, say, classical Greek sculpture, or even the Renaissance sculpture of the Italian Renaissance, you would think then it looks rather grotesque. But if you look at the symbolism and you start looking for clues and cues that tell you what this artist, who is often anonymous, is trying to communicate, you start to find a certain richness. So in this particular slide, I have referenced the Bantu symbols. Saki Mafundikwa, who is well known to many of you, our friend from Zimbabwe, wrote a very important work called the African alphabet, the story of the African writing. And he also references it with a K. And he has documented different writing systems across the continent. And this particular one on the left side is actually the one that looks at the Bantu system of writing, which is obviously using a kind of a symbolism, which is quite like a pictograph of sorts. But also at the same time, it uses color in a way that starts to reference what's happening. For example, if you look at the hyena, it's not just the physical hyena, but it also means greed. And you can see that cattle and animals are particularly important, just as people are. And the mouth eating at the bottom left-hand corner there, or the eyes that see, are quite directly translated. On the right side, you'll find Esther Mahlangu, she'll be 85 years on November 11th of this year. And she's one of my heroes on this continent. She's from the Ndebele ethnic group in South Africa. And she's been an ambassador for African art and design for over 60 years since she started working. She's done work painted the tail of British Airways aircraft. In fact, painted entire vehicles like the Rolls-Royce Phantom, which is one of the world's most expensive vehicles. When the new Fiat 500 was launched, she painted one. She did a BMW 5 Series in South Africa. And so she's well renowned and famous. You can look her up. I find her to be one of the exemplars of this richness of the symbolism of African art. And she uses natural materials like ostrich feathers with natural pigments to come up with these beautiful, beautiful pieces that reference our culture. And also, if you look at the Bantu symbols on the left, you start to see some of the elements creeping into her work there. Another way of looking at the symbolism, on the left-hand side, you see the meanings in baskets from Botswana. For example, if you look at the flight of the swallows, which is the second line on the left there, then you look at the baskets which are on the right-hand side and also the trays, the winnowing trays and so on. You start to understand, therefore, that these are not just random patterns. They actually are referencing the culture within which the people of Botswana live. But beautifully, the colors are earth colors because they use natural dyes and natural materials. And so you'll find that referencing coming through. You find some of them are a bit, tongue-in-cheek. For example, the urine trail of the bull. But I can see how it would be a zigzag pattern because I have seen livestock in motion. Another inspiring set of symbols comes from the Ghanaian peoples, in fact, the Adinkra symbols, which I mentioned at the beginning, where I chose the spider's web as a symbol of creativity. And you can see so many beautiful ones. For example, there's one here, which is basically a comb, which is a reference for feminine beauty, and so on. And another one which I like, which is the one that references learning from the past, Sankofa, which is a very important one. And symbols about cooperation and the supremacy of God and so on. So they all come with a proverb. So there's a proverb that goes with them, and you can look them up. You'll find them incredibly inspiring in that sense. Another way of looking at symbolism, in this case, I've picked on the kente cloth, which again comes from the Ashanti people of who live around Kumasi in Ghana. And those colors have meaning. And on the left-hand side, you will see the colors. For example, the blue is for peace and harmony. And you have green, which we can all relate to across our continent. You have gold and yellow, which are interchanged often to represent prosperity, wealth, royalty, and so on. And I'd like us to, again, engage with some of this, not at the superficial level, as much as I'm wearing a printed version of that kente cloth today. I'd like us to see the richness that many of these designs actually embody and engender. This one, I'm just going to leave it as is. I don't want to get into a lot of discussion. I'd like just to leave it as a teaser. On the left is a fertility doll from the Ghanaian people. On the extreme right here, we have the Ankh, which is an ancient Egyptian symbol, which talks about life and the gate, and therefore it sometimes represents a key, that opens up into the afterlife. And right here in the middle, you have the popular modern symbol for the feminine. So I'd just like to leave that there for you to think about, because I'm not making a statement. I'm also a student of African design, as much as I'm speaking about it. But I'd like us to see that African design is instantly universal as much as it is also local. So the concept of the glocal, if you may, where you have something that looks very local, like the application of the wooden material in the doll. Yet if you look at the outline and the symbolism, you start to ask yourself, maybe there are references that go way beyond that point that we come across often, but we don't actually link it to some of the designs that we often see. African design is intricate. Often people have looked at the Congo hairdressing and wondered how these ladies do this work. If you look at the two views of this person's head from the back and the top there, you start to see something incredibly intricate, almost like a woven basket, like the Botswana ones I was showing earlier. But what happens is, if there's a gentleman called Ron Eglash who wrote on the fractals of African geometry, and he references some of these hairstyles that actually reference the cosmology of, as they understand it, the people of Congo, the star systems, and they represent it in their hairdos. And this is knowledge that is shared constantly and experimented upon, and people don't go beyond that because they just say, wow, that's a nice, intricate hairstyle, but it actually references far more than what we might see at first glance. The young lady, very happy over here, kind of reminds me of the coronavirus bug with those little nodules sticking out. But I have to say that the coronavirus is not a beautiful thing, but I can't help but look at that and say the beauty of African art and design also brings delight, as you can see in that face there. The other point I'd like to mention about African design is that it's generative. There's a way in which African design is not wasteful. It tries to use as much of the materials that it can as possible to create newness and to rehash and reconstitute and reconfigure to bring beauty and aesthetics within a very functional space. So for example, these seats from the Senegalese designer Bibi Sek and his colleague uses traditional weaving techniques, yet at the same time creating very interesting seats in a modern and elegant style. So the idea of referencing both the traditional and the modern to generate new ways of looking at things, I find to be particularly enriching and exciting. Then African design is also novel. It responds to real needs. It responds to problems that are identified within the environment. And on the left, you see a gentleman known as Maurice Mbetsa from Nairobi, who came up with a drone. He actually tested it and flew in it as his contribution towards a drone taxi. You're aware that the first drone port in the world was launched in Kigali, Rwanda, and it carries medical provisions anywhere within the country. I think it takes about 17 minutes from Kigali to any part of the country to deliver those important payloads. And now Ghana also has a drone port. So Africa is incredibly novel in the way it uses technology and the way it solves problems, deploying technologies and also creating newness. On the top right-hand corner, you see the famous M-Pesa mobile money transfer system that was created in Kenya and now accounts for far more money than even banks and is for millions of Kenyans, and created systems that are even being used in Europe, India, and other places now. And at the bottom right-hand corner, you'll see the Optimal Energies Joule vehicle, which is Africa's first electric vehicle that was developed in Cape Town. You can see the Table Mountains in the background. Unfortunately, it didn't go into production, even though there's at least 5 prototypes that are still running around. And they were showcased when Cape Town was World Design Capital in the year 2014. So this is something that I celebrate. We have many other examples of novelty. We have the African Robotics Network based in Accra, Ghana, and others outside of Cairo in the Maker movement. We have also the electric vehicle that called the Chira, which was developed in Kampala, Uganda. They not only have a passenger vehicle, but they also have an electric bus. And we're talking about full electric, just like the Joule there that is in the image. And they're being tested before they go into production. Then if you have heard, there's a building in Harare, Zimbabwe, which is known as the Eastgate Center. And this is a shopping mall that was the first mall of its kind that referenced termite mounds, you know, the way termites create these anthills so that they can create passive cooling systems within their own structures. So this was a bit biomimicry inspired solution. And it is the first known high-rise in the world that actually uses this passive cooling techniques and has been recognized as a green design for architectural awards. Comic strips for Africans based on African heroes like Shaka Zulu and Luanda Magere from different parts of the continent, and many, many, many others where you see the African novelty coming through in the way they respond to. So there's very little frivolous activity when it comes to designs coming from our continent. And so having said that, those 6 themes, in my view, as much as I've not done a decoding of the African design, I've just given you clues and cues and encourage you to go beyond this, is to say then African design in summary is discursive, it's eclectic, it's symbolism-rich, it's intricate, it's generative, and it's novel. It also coincidentally spells out the word design so that it makes it easier for me to remember. And in conclusion, because this is an exciting debate today, and I see many friends, I saw that my friend Richie Mwalosi from Botswana is on the panel. My mentor, Adrienne Viljoen, who has been my guide, you know, the Somali proverb that be a mountain or lean on one. I lean on Adrienne, and she's been such an inspiration to me in a personal and also professional sense. Abbas Jami, who is my colleague at the Open Design Africa, and other many friends, including Adrian with the Nairobi Design Week, and all the NIDEC and DKS and IDAC friends, and also Paddy, maybe suggesting what I understand it means to be African. Kwame Nkrumah put it very well, the first president of Ghana. He said, I'm not an African because I was born in Africa, and you'll notice I put that with the C. That is what people understand to be Africa, but because Africa was born in me. So the Africa with the K is this co-creative narrative that I'm encouraging us to do together, so that people start to understand this beauty. So you can be from anywhere as long as you have this spirit, this zeitgeist of Africa in you that is alive and working towards the realization of the African century. So in conclusion, I'm not an African because I was born in Africa, but because Africa with a K was born in me. And so friends, fellow designers, and friends of design, I want to thank you once more for this really huge honor. And I'll be open to questions or discussion, and hoping that now, as I conclude, you then will be able to carry on this conversation. So thank you very much.